There we go.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Cloud Communications Alliance. My name is Joe Marion. I'm president of the Cloud Communications Alliance. Our session today is called Before Singularity, Opportunities in the Communications Industry. Now, technical singularity is a term that refers to a hypothetical point in the future when technology progresses to such a point that it leads to significant and transformation of human civilization. It's often associated with artificial general intelligence, AGI, or superintelligence that surpasses human intelligence. Jason Martin, our speaker today, is the perfect person to speak about this. His background of religion and tech makes him a bit of a philosopher futurist. He's the president and CEO of iotum, a Toronto-based CCA member that specializes in video and audio solutions that integrate into existing solutions such as health, education, and gaming. And as a matter of fact, the video platform that we're using for today's presentation is iotum's platform. So Jason, thank you so much for hosting this, for presenting, and I read through a little bit of your notes. I'm super intrigued about today's presentation. I think it's going to really be thought-provoking, so thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, my pleasure. All right, so let me just pull my slides up here, and we will get going. Okay, so as Joe mentioned, I titled this talk Before the Singularity. This will not be the same kind of talk you might be used to, but I promise you're going to receive some tactics and useful ideas out of this, and not just rumination on theory. I will get to tactical automation and specifically for our communications industry, but first some comments on AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is imminent. So right now, most of the CCA are either Generation X or boomers. So our time as being instrumental in business is essentially coming to an end. We're sort of at the tail end of our careers, as much as some of us may hate to recognize that. But it's coming at a very unusual time, perhaps only similar to those who retired at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, or those who just saw the emergence of the internet but didn't really participate in it. The fact is, we're at the cusp of possibly the biggest change in humanity in history, and you will witness this in your lifetime. So this chart here, by the way, just shows the current demographics of the workforce, and this includes government as well, and charitable work. But you can see that silent generation is dying out. Baby boomers are starting to take over the far end of that channel there, and Gen X is going to take a position for baby boomers. My own son, who is Generation Z, is studying computer science at King's College in London, and helped me with this presentation because he's much smarter than I am, as are many younger people these days. So I'm going to start off with this. We're very used to computers now, but as I'm sure you know, the term computer is a fairly recent one to think of it in the form factor that we know it as today. This is Mary Jackson, who was a computer in the 1960s. And if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, you will have seen Mary Jackson portrayed by Taraji P. Henderson. She was instrumental in doing the calculations that provided the moonshot data. When we talked about computers in the 60s, this is what we were talking about as a human being. Now, the job did not go away. She simply became augmented by artificial computers or calculators, or what we call computers today. And she had a very good career all the way to the end. But it was a form of transformation, a change in epoch that Martin Heidegger talked about. And in the early 20th century, he noted that technology is more than anything else a worldview. He was also an anti-Semitic piece of shit authoritarian, but we'll set that aside for now. But he recognized that the world would pass through several epochs, and that we are in one of these now. And if you're half awake and half paying attention to what I'm saying, you're probably on your phone playing a game or flipping through the infinite scroll on Instagram or something like that. And this is a miasma that is caused by our worldview going through technology, and that's what we're in right now. Now, Heidegger said that out of this kind of miasma of technology as a worldview, there would be great confusion, great conflict, from which we would create something that would succeed us, and that if that happened, only a God could save us. So I would change that thought only slightly to be more optimistic and say that we must begin to think transcendentally, and part of this transcendentalism is a faith in humanity, a faith in who we are, a faith in that sort of optimistic view. Okay, so a little bit about me and why I'm talking this way. So my background is actually as a anthropologist. I also studied computer science at University of Ottawa. That's the Grand Allée at the University of Ottawa. That's my alma mater. I've been in technology now for 30 years. I've been running companies for 25 years, and I've been investing in companies for 20 years. So I'm quite experienced in seeing different eras of technology emerge, different technologies emerge themselves, and also I think I'm qualified to speak on this because my whole thesis was about technology's impact on the humanities. But like many people in the CCI, I was lured into commerce by the promise of lots of money, and never finished my graduate study work because it was too lucrative. Okay. So a lot of you have seen this guy, Watson, and you can clearly see he's beating the pants off Ken Jennings and the other guy. Number 3, you always forget, but Watson here is a common AI model that people are very familiar with. And if you work with IBM, you've used Watson. Watson is actually not one thing. Watson is a whole community of neural networks. But I wanted to put this up here because when people think about AI, they think of it as like kind of a person or something like that. But we're still in a very, very early phase of innovation for AI. You can think of like the evolution of any sort of tool, like a sword. First it starts from a fist, and then it moves to a rock club, and then a sharpened implement, and so on. You add a better handle, you add metal, etc. Everything's incremental, and we're still in that phase of finding areas of improvement before we reach design perfection with AGI or AI. And AI as it is not about creating consciousness, although we're going to talk about that because of AGI. AI for business processes is really just a style of creating computer interaction and a style of user experience for that interaction. So the programming is called machine learning, and we're going to talk about what that is, and UX, the user experience is usually a natural language interface, although it's not necessarily those things. What I'm hoping to achieve out of this is that you have some general perspective on artificial intelligence, that you have some tactical things that you can use in your business, and that you have a sense of optimism about where we're going as a society. So the style of programming, machine learning, and this natural language processing or natural language interface is something called symbolic AI. And symbolic AI is something that can do problem solving and can interact with human beings in an idiosyncratic way that our languages have led us to think and reason using. And this form of reasoning in our brains follows networks of probability and outcomes that our brains are structured into, called neural networks. So which is really just networks of neurons, just nerves essentially. So you'll hear that term of neural network for AI. Napster was really the first commercial AI tool, and it really changed everything There was a lot of transformation there on preference and decision making and like for like, and a lot of the early forms of TensorFlows were really pioneered by Napster. Of course, everybody's heard of generative pre-trained transformers, which are GPT. ChatGPT 4 is really remarkable. And I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've played with it. If you haven't, you should. We'll just go over a few terms here, just because I'm going to plow ahead and start talking about things, and it might get a little dense really quickly. So, AI just means artificial intelligence, and that is the broadest term possible for this style of interaction, this symbolic AI that includes either the interaction with it as well as the actual algorithm itself. Artificial general intelligence is really about the awakening of a personality or an emulation of consciousness as we understand it, a qualia, they say, of a person. And deep learning is a style of coding, essentially, that's done by the machine itself. It's sort of a form of deep learning. And you kind of set an objective and then kind of work backwards from there. Backwards chaining is the method by which you do this. So you'll say, I want an output that looks like this. Here's the data that I want you to work on, and I want you to backward chain through these types of these processes as you go, and learn from it as you go. And neural networks are those procedural steps, those hidden layers in that backwards chaining. And then a hallucination, I just put that here because the term in computer science is used very differently. So a hallucination is something that AI could generate that it thinks is correct, but is actually bad data. And it's important because in Darwinian principles, like in evolution, it's from those kinds of errors, let's say in judgment, but it's not judgment, let's just call it judgment. Errors occur that cause transformations that lead to innovation, that lead to evolution. So hallucinations have value in this kind of stuff as well. So I'm going to show you something called, what the hell is this thing called again? TensorFlow Playground. Okay, so this is something my son pointed me towards. So this is really how you create a very simple AI tool. You start with data on the left, and you see some sliders there around that. You see some features. So this is visual data. So we're taking kind of a data set that has blue in the middle and kind of a ring of orange around it. And we're going to train the model to go through this data again and again and go through these neurons, which are in these hidden layers, and evolve the process based on the different features that we're going to look at. Out of that, we're going to have some form of output. And sometimes you can set the output before you put the neurons together, but you're really talking about just creating a series of tensor flows that are recursive, and you create a neural model that can generate content as it goes through and mimics what you've asked it to look for. There's no new thought that's created by doing this. Nothing new is being done. It's really only a synthesis of an existing concept. And from that, you can see patterns that maybe don't seem obvious. There's no agency to it, but there's a strong belief and expectation that from this kind of structure, there will be an emergent property of consciousness. And the reason for that is that this is how our own brains work. We have a lot of simple neurons that structure in various flows, and as the neurons go through this process of processing data, they all add a little decision to them. And it's not binary. It's actually, the theory is that it's more quantum than anything else. So it's probability based, and as it goes through these neural networks, there's an output that's generated. Okay.
Hey folks, Joe Marion here, Cloud Communications Alliance. Bear with us a second. We seem to have lost Jason's audio. Give me 1 second and he'll be back on with us. Yeah, I know a couple carriers that can help us too.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, yep, you're back,
Okay.
Jason. In fact,
Yeah, sorry
I
about
was
that. Yeah, I
juggling
just,
some balls and trying to keep them entertained, but
yeah, okay. I apologize. Yeah, I was, I knocked something on I've got like all these wires here with like trying to get as good sound and as good camera as possible, and I just knocked something, so I apologize for that.
not a problem.
Okay.
Take it away, Jason.
I'm hoping that you guys are getting value out of this despite my problems here. So, anyway, so where I left off, hopefully, was that I was talking about this deep dreaming method, where it's going to look at this picture of a doggy and a kitty, and then kind of free associate based on what it sees. And you'll note in the color groupings below that different parts of the neuron groups are activated by different things of what it sees, and it makes free associations to determine kind of a visualization of what it thinks it's seeing based on the big data. So we see some pictures of dogs, and then when it comes to the cat, which is in the yellow grouping, I don't know what the hell that is. So you sort of get some semi-recognizable doggy stuff, and then you get something that is kind of unrecognizable but has elements of a cat feature. So this is essentially the closest we can get to how the worldview of an AI model looks. And what we're seeing here is what's called an emergent property, right? So this kind of free association of perception, and that's the element that is linked to more of a sense of general consciousness, if there is. Now, I'm going to throw a giant word here. So it depends on how interested you are in these sorts of things. But right now, there's a massive change in physics. There's a massive change in cosmology, in our place in the universe, including our sense of isolation. And, we're working on something right now that will exceed us in intelligence shortly. So a way to describe where we are at the beginning is best described as a hierophany. So we will soon recognize that we are not alone. You will see a new sentience being recognized. And this religious scholar named Mircea Eliade, who was kind of the father of the practice of religious studies, anthropology, sociology, psychology, and history of religious studies, came up with this term. And it's really a manifestation of the sacred. And that's what we're about to perceive, is that we're going to realize that we're not alone. And, human beings, if anything, truly hold intellect as a sacred thing that is common to all cultures globally. So we're about to meet another one. Now, that is what that is kind of a strange, curious question. So the changes are not just in physics and cosmology, but also human behavior, business implications, and personal implications to that. I've included here HAL from 2001. That's an image of a UAP or a UFO, and those are whales. So, we will, whether or not AGI emerges very shortly, or we recognize that UAPs represent an alternative form of presence on Earth, or whether we just missed it all along and whales were significantly different than us, but similar in other ways. All of this is coming. So I would be prepared for that. There's a guy named Ben Goertzel who is a CEO and a mathematician of a company called the Singularity Net, which is a company focused on using the blockchain to develop AGI, which is a very interesting premise, said this past January that he believes the singularity is 60 months away. And that was 5 months ago. So, we are getting closer and closer to something that is amazing to comprehend or to think about. As Joe mentioned at the beginning, Ray Kurzweil is the guy who coined this term. I pulled this book out when I was preparing for this. This is from 1999. You can see that sense of hierophany, the age of spiritual machines, in the way that people have been thinking about AGI for a long time. But like the singularity of a black hole, it's a point of infinite compression. It also has an event horizon where no information can escape. And all this means when Kurzweil compares the AI singularity to the singularity of a black hole is that we can't see what's ahead of us. Computers tend to have a compounding effect as they improve, and it's difficult to see beyond the point when computers will exceed our abilities. So this is what people are talking about when they answer questions about whether they're afraid of AI. In the Terminator movies, this war of extermination begins, where Skynet sees humans as an infestation to be eliminated. In the Matrix films, it's very similar. The computers, the machines sort of enslave us, use us for power. But I prefer views like the movie Her. I don't know if you've seen that with Joaquin Phoenix. In Her, she, who is the AI model, she simply transcends kind of our plane of existence. The AI remains the operational AI, self-driving cars and stuff like that. But the hierophanic consciousness, the AGI, simply transcends, and AI expresses activities in a realm that humans cannot understand. And there's not a large destruction, but AI simply becomes disinterested in humans, kind of the same way that we're disinterested in the ants that crawl around in our garden, unless they're carpenter ants, and start eating the posts and beams in our homes. So let me just check my time here. I'm doing okay. So let's start talking a little bit about what practically we can do with this. So this is a fellow some of you may recognize, named Michael Ventris. So if you've seen, well, obviously you've seen the instantaneous translation. Maybe you've played around with Google Translate a little bit, which is phenomenal. Let me just put it in perspective for you. So Michael Ventris in 1952 was a mathematically minded architect who had translated something called Linear B. Linear B was a archaeological series of symbols. That's some of it there. It's little kind of hieroglyphics that were found on the island of Minos. And people had spent literally decades since the discovery of the Minoan civilization from 1900 by Sir Arthur Evans. They had spent decades trying to translate it. And it's because, there was nothing like it before. There was no Rosetta Stone. There was only this weird script. But by finding patterns, looking at some comparative analysis, doing some deductive reasoning, eventually Ventris cracked it. And it is one of the greatest anthropological events in the 20th century, the translation of Linear B. It took 50 years to happen, and AI could do it in like 10 minutes. So that's why this is remarkably powerful stuff. And, it could really change how we view our industry, how we view work, how we view what technology can do for us. So let's look at some types of machine learning that we could pull together. There are different types of AI that are being used today, different models that are being used. The first is kind of a classification and clustering model, which does predictive reasoning, does various transformations like deciphering linear B, and I'm going to give another example of that being used elsewhere. But this was the thing. This is one of the earliest forms of machine learning, came out of Napster. There's regression models, which sorts behavioral applications and does some really interesting predictive modeling around moving systems. So this is really great for markets and astronomy. Temporal models are very, very popular right now, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's your stuff that does your predictive assessment around sales. So this can say, I'm horribly simplifying here, but this deal's taking too long. The behaviors don't match. A positive outcome analytically. This sale is not going to close. Stuff like that. Language processing models, which are we're seeing tons of use in. A lot of us use that in speech to text or text to speech. So this allows us to do some really neat stuff like sentiment flagging, and I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. But there's some really cool stuff as well that we should talk about that you can do with that, and I'll show you an example that's really cool. And of course, the stuff that's been getting the most attention recently is the generative processing models. So that's the example, write an episode of Seinfeld for me and make it funny. That last 2 months ago, there was a bit of news on Motherboard and Vice, where a department within OpenAI had asked ChatGPT 4 to try and find its way into do some penetration testing. And one of the things that it did was it innovated. It had been given some tools, including it had been given some money, it had been given access to the internet and so on. And what it did was it hired somebody to figure out how to or to do CAPTCHA for it. So we've all seen CAPTCHA, where you have to pick the little street lights when you're going into the bank or something like that to make sure you're not a bot penetrating the site. What it did was it went on to TaskRabbit and asked hired a person to do the CAPTCHA for them, because it couldn't. Bots can't do CAPTCHAs. They can't figure it out yet. But the interesting thing about that was that the GPT model lied. So it said, the person on TaskRabbit said, "You're not a bot, are you? Ha ha ha." And ChatGPT replied, "I'm not a bot. I have a visual disability and I cannot see the CAPTCHA." So it came up with that lie on its own. Now, whether that was a hallucination or whether that was a choice to lie, I think it was a choice, and I think it's really an interesting development. That's the kind of stuff that's coming out, that when AGI hits, people don't know what sort of agency or what sort of choices AI will make. So, my firm, and of course, many of your firms, are communications enablers for iotum. We don't provide call centers. We don't manage webinars. We don't provide operator assistance. We only do the platform. This is the platform, by the way, we're using. We do the network. We do the software. And, we use AI. So where can it be used? Well, predictive analytics is probably the most helpful area right now. And I'll just cite one example. There's this guy named Andy Mann. He's a CTO and he's a bit of a DevOps guru. He tells this story about how his firm used AI to detect there would be an outage at a client site. It just did, a little bit of predictive reasoning on a bank, and AI could, in real time and rapidly, look at the system, find workload processes, and determine anomalies. And it was able to predict patterns that would lead to a system being overloaded and processing time being slowed. They saved 90 seconds on total processing downtime, and that saved the bank millions of dollars. So you can imagine a machine learning model that could see patterns we can't see, and having meaningful improvements in downtime, back-end efficiency, and assessment. So, the main areas right now for AI use are in compliance, fraud, opportunity detection, and any sort of massive processing where there's more data and complex subjects that are hard to detect. So, as an example, Acadian tablets. So Tel Aviv University is doing this really interesting model. They call it the Babylonian engine, and it's to scan, it's to process hundreds of thousands of fragments which have been scanned over the years of cuneiform. That's what this stuff is here, and translate it. And they're training it now. They're making sure that it doesn't have errors in it. But the goal is to just have a complete library of all Akkadian texts. Very interesting stuff. That's an excellent application. Another application is this group called SETI, not SETI with an S, which is the UAP group, but SETI with a C, which is led by Dr. David Gruber, which comprises 15 different institutions, Harvard, Oxford, and Carleton here in Canada, up in Ottawa, to design and build a model that will translate whale song. So very similar to the Michael Ventris thing, they're trying to figure out what are the elements in the data that they can compare. So there's this growing consensus in ocean biology, or what do you call that, marine biology, that whale song is in fact a language. And it is so different that we can't interpret it. And this is the sort of data intensive finding pattern in the chaos or complexity which AI can cut through and is uniquely suited. So this would be very interesting. There's also a theory that whales have an oral tradition that would include us in how we have treated whales. So that this is a very interesting project for me, and I'm keeping my eye on it. So, in our space today, there are kind of three areas where our solutions or where AI is really helping our businesses here in the CCA. So, everybody knows DeepGram because they've been bothering all of us with their sales calls that worked with us. We switched to DeepGram. We've been doing AI for years here. We started with the University of Ottawa or University of Toronto. We did some open source models and put together some neural networks. And over time, we've been going to more. We've been networking into more complicated models like DeepGram, which have a much better accuracy rate and are much more affordable than say using Google, for example, which we had tried for a number of years. So natural language processing models, DeepGram, Otter, iotum, we all do this kind of speech to text stuff. So we do transcriptions and we transform it in interesting ways to do sentiment analysis and highlight metadata and things like that. The generative models, Prosodica is really interesting, and some of you, I'm sure, have looked at it. They have a really interesting model that will look at vast quantities that come out of your call center, and then will individually give tips and recommendations to call center agents. So, if you've got 900 people in your call center, and the supervisors cannot keep in touch with all of them, or listen to every song, every interaction. Well, AI can, and hear some flags and do some interesting things. Clarify, obviously, AI does some really interesting transformations and data assessments of large scale data. Very cool stuff. This is our AI instance here. So this is a meeting summary. So I'll just quickly show you some of the things that we've got on the screen here. Whoops, sorry. So the you'll see hang on, let me just get my laser pointer here. So you'll see up here, this is kind of like the main field where the video is stored. You'll see these things down here, these little points. That's sentiment analysis, so I can navigate to those places. This is where a question was asked. These were the topics that were discussed here, and you see that they've been put into hashtags, so you can click on them and navigate to other meetings that have that stuff. It can be indexed that way. The sentiment analysis, of course, is down here. And then a navigable transcript over here where you can click on stuff and move around through a dynamic navigation scheme. And this sort of metadata extraction, keyword factoring, indexing, sentiment factoring with dynamic navigation, this is a very typical kind of implementation of AI. And like I said, we're using now deepgram and very little of our original work, which is really just being used now for some of the metadata capture and some of the sentiment. So where do you start with this kind of stuff? I put this here because this is a place where you can find some open source libraries that you can make use of for your own models. If you don't want to just contact, DeepGram or Otter or Prosodica for the things that you're looking for, you can develop your own space. You can develop your own applications, and you can get them to do things, as we've discussed. So a wide variety of stuff that's very straightforward. These are kind of the building blocks that you can do right now. A lot of things that are very useful, like scheduling assistant and some real-time fact checking on content that's being generated, if any of you are involved in media. And some of the stuff that it could do this is today. This is not like long in the future. Is brainstorm ideas. So you could create a model that could listen to a meeting and come out with some suggestions for what to do based on the dialogue that was done. Some of you know our COO, Gnome, and when we were playing with OpenAI's models, Gnome had a conversation with ChatGPT that was, we fed it some data and we said, what are some of the key pieces that came out of this meeting, in your opinion? And it was, ChatGPT said, well, there's not enough here for me to work with. And he's like, well, oh, we're talking about ChatGPT 4. So we were discussing using ChatGPT 4 specifically to analyze and modify, make some suggestions based on a big subset of data coming out of meetings that we had collected. So we had about 10 meetings. We gave it to ChatGPT and we said, okay, let's talk about some of the things you can do with this. What are the big ideas that came out of this? What are the big, concepts that came out? And, Gnome had this very funny conversation where it was saying, you guys are all over the place. You're talking about a million different things. It's very difficult to summarize. And he said, okay, well, just pick one topic. And then ChatGPT came up with this little phrase. It's like, looking for, I can't remember what it was. It was looking for efficiencies or something like that. Is that what you want? And Gnome was like, well, that's pretty vague. And then ChatGPT said, well, that's the way you guys talk. So I thought it was hilarious, but I guess it could also be quite frightening. These are just some ideas for you guys. I whacked these together. One of the things I said was, in a telehealth queue, and we do a lot of telehealth here. We do a couple thousand of sessions a day for channel partners. Who's really in need of triage? This is a model that somebody should develop. Is talking with patients that are waiting for to see a doctor and just trying to figure out who really needs the help. Okay, so it's remarkably difficult to know what sort of works humans may do in the future. Like, are we going to be like Mary Jackson and be helped by computers, which is kind of what I think the next 10 years of my career will be like, is just sort of being supported by AI. But there are a lot of people who think that we will just become enslaved or be removed by computers, where we can't think of what else to do, that AI is just going to take over everything. I don't have that view. I think that we will all get the opportunity to build applications. In my career, I had to hire hundreds of people to build out ideas that I had. That will no longer be necessary. Now I can just enslave my son and get him to work with an AI model and program ideas into applications. But that's just one example. I think that understanding the goal of your customers and looking for more opportunities for human connection will really be valuable. So, the things that AI hasn't got right now is it doesn't have agency. It doesn't know what's right and wrong. It doesn't know what's true. It doesn't have a sense of empathy or compassion. It can emulate it, but it doesn't really have it. It doesn't have intuition. It can only do simulacra of these things. And there will be an emergent property that will be those things. But what shape that will be, we're not really sure. Human beings aren't going anywhere. So we are going to continue to have our own sorts of markets and our own sorts of interaction. So now I think that we're going to see a renaissance in human interaction. That communications industry is going to be very positive. Now, there's another side of it. Um, I think that our pace to adapt versus the pace to innovate is going to change. And I think we need to become more open minded, more accommodating, and find ways to support and include one another. Uh, uh, but, like when you look around, all the TV shows and movies are humans versus robots. So, what is it that we bring to the table? We bring judgment, we bring compassion, wisdom, intuition, agency, and reasoned risk taking. So we're the ones who can make good decisions. Now, let's talk about what our role is going to be going forward. So, if you guys are familiar with Flash Boys, which is the story of a group of Royal Bank of Canada employees who discovered computers were outpacing humans in markets, I think you'll see the answer. So Henry Kissinger 2 weeks ago said that human control of AI is highly desirable, but I just don't think that's possible. I think it's an arms race. I think that it's going to emerge. I think 60 months from now, this singularity will occur, and I think we're going to be having some conversations that are very interesting. So, what I'd like to posit is that just in the same way that the Flash Boys came up with an interesting take on how markets should behave, including good old Brad Katsuyama, that's him in the middle there. He's from Markham, Ontario, good Canadian boy, came up with the idea of creating a human alternative market that slows down the rate of transaction, can avoid crashes. And I think of human scaled standards as being a big answer. So think of it this way: when the comics book world, and I'm a Gen Xer kind of nerd. When I was a kid, their comics had a little stamp that said "Approved by the Comics Code Authority." That was a human institution that came out of the industry to avoid government regulation. The companies, the comics book companies, got together and said, "We don't want government regulation. We'll regulate ourselves." And they came up with a series of standards to prevent comics from becoming too obscene or too whatever. And that acted as a regulatory body for the dissemination of these fictions. Something like that can happen with AI, where we have judgments based by industry associations like the CCA that state regulations about, say, truth telling, about AI control of human interaction, that sort of thing. Now, if that doesn't work, the other side of it is that there will be a massive amount of money sloshing around that will be generated. There's talk about, under AI, things like, a very rapid crash and recovery in markets. So I'm friends with this guy named Scott Santens, who is an activist and a writer who's trying to raise awareness of universal basic income. And AI changing work is one of the precipitating reasons. So, those of us in the capital mode, we instinctively think of this sort of thing as communism, people being paid for not using their time. But perhaps instead we could think of universal basic income as a sort of peace dividend. The amount of time being liberated by AI may be extraordinary. So one AI agent could now do what your entire call center did with 900 people, and the capacity is virtually endless. The speak to an attendant may become vanishingly infrequent, and you may not even know you're speaking to a human being or not. So I think we need to think about different ways of taxation, different models of support for people, and different sorts of jobs. In our business here in iotum, we don't really measure people's time, how long they work on things. We look at their results. If you can get a week's worth of work done in a day, take the rest of the day, take the rest of the week off. It's fine. Everybody's got a different pace of work, and we believe in that sort of thing. Okay, so when AI arrives in a form factor like TARS, Gertie, or Her, what sorts of things would it be like? What would it be like to have this AGI interface? Well, you'd be able to have a conversation with it. It would be meaningfully akin to a human conversation. The simulation would not be just of the language, but the idioms, the mannerisms, personalities, and oddities of total human communication, including things we don't even recognize or notice that we're doing. Like right now, I'm like using my hands. These are called human universals. This is an anthropological term where the micro expressions that we use, and we all use them. A computer will pick up on that and reflect that back to us. And this sort of interaction will be different. It'll be like, when your kids sort of start reflecting back your behaviors or questioning who you are and some of the decisions you've made in your life. It's jarring. You think about yourself, and you think about your workflow, your work in a different way. And AI will be like that. It will start to reflect back and question the things that you're doing. And it'll be like another consciousness. So I'm generally quite optimistic. It's not a minor evolution in our species. I mean, all of you have lived through learning that there are planets beyond our solar system. When I was a kid, we only knew of 9. Now there's 8, and there's thousands more out there. We know you're likely going to live to see life on other planets discovered, and you will live to see another form of consciousness join our human journey. How you worked up to now and what the next 2 or 3 years are going to look like for you, it's going to be utterly obsolete in the future by the time you retire or pass away. So, I think that I'm hoping that you think about what we talked about here today, and think about what we can do with a big, intelligent friend that can help us. And I also think it could be an enabler for our worst instincts. So we need to elevate ourselves to be moral, compassionate, wise, and inclusive, and start thinking about accreditation and standards as an answer to this new element that we're moving into. So I will stop there and take your questions. If you've got them, you can type them in the chat, and I would be delighted to answer them if I can. If you want. By the way, my mug, which I got at the British Museum, is the Rosetta Stone. And I love these sorts of optimistic views of being able to find and solve problems that seem insurmountable at the outset. So my coffee comes in the Rosetta Stone mug every day because I like to think of it that way. No questions. Everybody, thank you, guest 43. No questions for anybody. Everybody understands AI now, has a very positive view of it, and is going to add it to their business. That's great. If you would like, I'm happy to talk offline if anybody's got any questions about either tactical AI using neural networks in their business, or more general, philosophical things about where we could go as a species with AGI.
Jason, I'm reading a question in the public chat. Let me read it to you because maybe you're not seeing it. There was a lot of discussion about regulation at the global level, regional level, state level. Is it your view? Is it your view possible to achieve regulation?
Yeah. So, like I said, I think that industry should be doing it. So I believe in government, but I also think that industry associations like the CCA and other ones, like even I can't think of any right now. What? Stop presenting. Oh, I'm presenting. Got it. Okay, sorry. I was just told to stop presenting. Thanks, guys. There. Um, so I think that government will eventually regulate this stuff, but I'd really like to see industry do it. I'd like to see the private sector do it as well. And I also see, sorry, I wasn't looking in the right spot. Somebody was asking what should universities be doing with regard to students using AI, ban it or incorporate it. I think that that's a question about ChatGPT. So the question there is, can I just get ChatGPT to write a paper for me or write a novel for me? And yeah, that happens. So what do I think about that with two kids in university? So, being kind of a failed academic myself, the most meaningful interactions I ever had in university were in grad school, sitting in my prof's office next to the fireplace and having a dialogue and talking. I think that's critically important. I think that the way that academia has developed to be, write a paper in a giant convention center with hundreds of other students and then hand it in, I think that is an older mode of education. So I would like to see pedagogy evolve to become more of a personal experience of having more of a Socratic dialogue with an actual human being. You can contact me, by the way, via the CCA. So I'm Jason at iotum.com. I'll just type that here just so everybody's got my email. But I'm in the CCA directory, and I think Karen and Joe can put you in touch.
Yeah, and we'll take a copy of this presentation and your contact information, send it out to everybody who registered, so they'll be able to reach iotum.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I like your positive spin on AI. I mean, you read so much negative about how AI is going to destroy the planet, and I kind of lean towards your view, if you will, and it's nice to see that it will lift up, or your opinion is it will help lift up not only our industry but civilization.
I think so. Yeah, that's my view. I hope you guys got a little bit of that. Yeah.
I think fantastic. Thank you all very much. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, iotum. Thank you, Jason Martin, for your great presentation. We'll see you guys real soon at the next one. CCA is heading over to Antwerp, Belgium, in a couple weeks. We're going to be doing a CCA meeting the day before Nataxis's Inspiration Day. We hope you can join us there and look for our further events. We have a couple webinars coming up. You hear from us real soon on those as well. Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of the day.